Oh, you're on the switchers, hey? Okay,
I'm on the
cool.
ones and twos.
You're
I
on
learned
the
how to
ones
do
and
them
twos?
this morning.
In order to be interesting, you have to first be interested. Like, I was in your class. Like, that means to the other person, like, wow, you took the time to show up for me. So how am I gonna I would love to show up for you.
Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of the Cinematography for Actors podcast. I'm Haley Royal, your host, joined by other hosts, Indiana Underhill and Brianna Wing. And we have a guest here today with us that I'm really excited about, Nicki Sun. Hi!
Hi, thanks for having me here. This setup is really cool. I know this is audio and you got video, but y'all should see it wherever they post this video, but it's super awesome.
Aww, the video
so sweet.
doesn't do it justice yet.
Yeah.
We'll
You
get
got
there.
egg crakes on the wall. Like,
Yeah.
One step at a time.
Little soundproofing.
Yeah. In fact, I love it because people, like viewers, will be able to see the progress. Be like, I remember when.
Yeah.
They
I
didn't
remember
have
when you
anything.
didn't have
When it
anything
was
on the wall.
Yeah.
One overhead light just like beaming into us.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're like cinematography for actors and talking about lighting. But here we do one overhead.
Yeah.
It's really great.
Waiting for that sponsorship to
Our
come in.
under
Yeah.
eyes look awesome. Our noses look beautiful.
Yes.
So I'm happy to have Nicki here today because we met Nicki at NAB this year because I just happened to have a free 30 minutes and I walked in late to a course that she was teaching about finding confidence to go live. And I mean, as we know, we've invited you all on this journey of mine. I have been struggling through building a company with a lot of imposter syndrome. And so it was so just serendipitous that I was like, oh, I'll just go over here to this. It was a part of the conference that I wasn't spending any time at anyway. And I walked maybe half a mile to get there, and just walked in, not expecting much. And this fantastic ray of sunshine, Nicki Sun Sunshine, being like, why not you? You had this amazing PowerPoint of ways to find confidence and ways to really believe in yourself, to know that you can do things. And then I got really lucky to be able to say hello at the end of the conference, and now here she is. It's so exciting.
Well, it's so wild. Thank you for reminding me and also your viewers and audience how we met, because that was the first NAB show that I not only was one of the official hosts for the NAB show live, I was also teaching 11 courses
Oh my gosh.
within that 3-day period. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get through each day. I don't have a PA following me, telling me to like, go, go, go. I just had to internally know and just be on top of everything.
Mhm.
So just in that moment and setting your schedule, knowing where everything is, I'm type A, not overly OCD, but I'm very organized. I'm a huge Capricorn, but everything has to be scheduled out for me in order for me to give myself time and the ability to talk one-on-one with people. So I know when I was on that stage that you saw, like I had back-to-back on one day, it's like I had half an hour in between, and there was one day where I had to go from West Hall back to Central Hall within a 10-minute time. So I was like, I tell people ahead of time, I am absolutely like, here's my email, this is how we could connect, but right after I end my presentation, I cannot speak to anybody.
Right.
And I think just again, setting people up for expectations, kind of going over agenda before things happen has helped me a lot. Because I just like to prepare people's expectations as much as possible. So it was also very serendipitous that after I was done that I met you and Indy at the mixer that, you know, was happening for Gals and Gear, but cinematography, where it was the Society of Camera Operators, especially targeting and welcoming women DPs, women directors to have a happy hour. And I think I left my gear there because I had started my live streams there and then ended there.
Right.
And I think I ran into you all, and I don't know, I think I shared my very personal story about my dad.
You did.
And I think we shared a cry. And I was like, I was not expecting to cry, but I had been at this conference, 11 classes, back-to-back, 4-hour live streams just being on. And I didn't have the time to process my feelings of like what it has meant for me to like come to NAB show in 2010 with my dad. Then he passes away, and now I'm like one of the official hosts and teaching 11 classes at a production and post-production conference that I had no idea how I was going to get from when my dad first took me in 2010. So all the emotions definitely welled up, and I was like, I'm sharing a cry with two absolute strangers. But I don't know, it just felt so right in that moment. So I have to thank you both for being so gentle and so welcoming with me, because that leaves an impression on me, because you never forget the people that, they actually care what I had to say.
Of course.
So,
Yeah.
happy to be on this
We
podcast.
did hear what you had to say. It was honestly such a cool moment. Now you've also got some really cool news to share with us, which is cool because we got to see you kind of, doing already big success at NAB, and then this whole new thing that's really exciting. Tell us about your show. What's going on?
Oh my gosh. So thanks for asking. So along with the imposter syndrome, it was like, there's so many people who are podcasting, and why me? What gives me the validation or the validity to be like, you can have a show with your name on it, right?
Right.
But then I'm looking at all the podcasters and all the content, and I'm like, what I've been wanting to do. Like, I started essentially vodcasting before vodcasting was a term.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you look at my channel since 2009 on YouTube, I've been interviewing especially marginalized people like Asian Americans on screen since 2009, doing
Right.
one-on-one interviews, focusing on quality audio and video. It just wasn't vodcasting at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So just taking a break in between to focus on the technical aspects to help creators with the technical parts of how to amplify their voices on camera and create their content that they want. And then also starting a podcast for the first time with two other wonderful co-hosts, Messy Sexy Me. That's a dating and lifestyle podcast, so that's completely different subject matter. But I was like, how do I mix the two together but also sustain myself? Because I had to think about when I was doing one-on-one interviews, it's not like I was getting paid for it. I was doing it purely from passion.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until I started a tech channel that all these tech brands were like, we like to send you gear. We like to, pay you for, like a overview of how to, operate a microphone or, how to set up your shot as an independent creator. And I realized that there has to be a way where whatever I create, I can ask for sponsorship and just get over that fear, that paralyzing fear of like, will they pay me money or not?
Yeah,
and it's like, well, the worst thing that they can say is no.
Yeah.
So
they're a business.
They're a business.
And you've got a market. You
too.
have an audience that they might have no idea how to tap into.
And the thing is, you're creating high quality content, and it's like, we want to have the best interest for everybody. So all that being said, overcoming that imposter syndrome of 10 years being in front and behind the camera, being a freelance host for a lot of other companies, a lot of other media companies, and then also combining my video background as a filmmaker, as a producer, director, editor, putting it together. And I'm like, and then my last podcast, I was like, I can do this. I can literally create, host, direct, I can edit my own show and just call it the Nicki Sun Show.
Yeah.
And that's what I decided to do. I like combining everything that I've done over the past 10 years, everything that I've learned and still learning. I still believe in being a student of the craft and just always every day being a learner. And finally creating the show that I've always wanted. And, I am not on a studio. I'm not like backed by any crazy big studios. I'm like, I've been doing everything independent for a long time. But now if I continue independently, produce a really high quality product that people want to listen and watch, I can then dictate how much each episode's going to be, what sponsors are going to do it, and conflict of interest. It is a little bit more to work with multiple brands, but I mean, in the industry, that okay, these two are microphone companies, so maybe we can't have both of them sponsor the same episode, but you do it in a way where you maximize that microphone's potential, because maybe one might be a wireless lav and one might be like a podcast mic.
Right.
So I just put them in separate episodes. But the Nicki Sun Show is essentially a 1 hour, one-on-one vodcast. It's both video and audio, which is why it's called Video Podcast. And it's going to be premiering October 4th on my dad's birthday.
Oh my gosh.
And it's just to continue the lightened conversations that I have with some of the world's most fascinating creators. anybody from emerging to established. So I think the cool thing about that is I've been able to really land some big people that I've interviewed in the past, and they just happen to remain friends. And when they're like, I'd love to be on your show or I'd love to support you, I'm like, great, because when you say yes and you're a big person and you know that you have the following to help someone out who's just starting out, I appreciate that so much. But what that does when you come on my show is when I interview somebody else who's emerging and maybe doesn't have their footing quite yet, but they're incredible, it elevates everybody.
Right.
You know how they say a rising tide lifts all ships?
Yeah.
And so that's what I really want to do is like, you may hear from these people you know that are very popular, they're very famous, they're celebrities, but you may not have heard of these folks who are amazing too. They just don't have like the network
yet too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that's just what it was, because in the beginning when I first started, when I was interviewing a lot of the Asian American community, because I felt like there was a lack of recognition on screen. And it's really cool because I feel like now it's 10 years later, we're feeling a different wave of representation. But if you look back for that person's first interview, most of the time it's with me. I take pride in knowing that I truly just genuinely believe in people's abilities and I want to amplify, put a spotlight on them. And then they remember that. So like years down when it's like, I'm big now. Thank you for giving me my first interview. Is there anything I can do to help you? Then I can turn in my favorite card. I'm like, well, when I did that interview, could I interview you now on my new show?
Yeah.
And then that's how it works. So maintaining and establish relationships is huge, especially in filmmaking, and especially as actors. It's like a lot of these gigs that we get are from a previous gig and it's word of mouth. So
let's dig into networking a little because we're huge on it. And I mean, that's how we met. From the Nicki Sun perspective, what are your favorite networking tips, tricks, or like the things that you will spend the most time on in order to have the most authentic community around you?
That's a great question. I think in order to be interesting, you have to first be interested. So what I mean by that is if I am looking to make connections with other filmmakers or directors, especially women directors, I am going to find the panel that is focusing on amplifying and spotlighting these women directors and cinematographers, because that's how I'm going to be genuinely like, oh, like Haley said, like I was in your class. Like that means to the other person that, wow, you took the time to show up for me. So how am I going to I would love to show up for you. I'm interested. You were interested in me. Like now I'm interested in the people who I'm attracting. So that's my first thing is like, if you are wanting to find certain like people to network with, look online. There's events happening all the time. I'm sure that Cinematography Actors has an amazing resource and database. Society of Camera Operators. Everything that you're interested in, there's a niche. There's an organization or an official organization that you can absolutely get involved with. So that's number one. And then like if you're meeting up at places like NAB Show or Cine Gear Expo or CES, for instance, DM, like if you made a connection before, I follow up. I'm like, are you going to be at NAB Show this year? Would love to like chat. Here's my schedule.
Yeah.
So I know if I'm the one like, okay, then I can set a base foundation. I literally set a Google Live viewing of my schedule. And I just sent it to friends that were there so they would just know. I wouldn't have to like go back and forth. I'm like, here's my schedule. This is where I'll be at all times. Then you on your end can be like, oh, I'm in West Hall. I'll check her out. Or I'm in Central Hall. And that way it works. Because I don't anticipate everybody to rearrange their life for me. But it's like, this is where I'll be.
They can find 100%. Where they slot in.
And then, and then they like catch me after the class and then we catch up that way. And another thing, if you're just meeting people for the first time, I absolutely love this trick. And for those of us who made a really great connection and are a little bit more social, which could be a little difficult, I take a selfie with them. And then I ask for their email or their phone number, whatever they're comfortable with, because normally they'll be like, oh, send me that picture. And then sometimes you want to follow up with that person, but you have to give them the grace that they've met hundreds of people and they might not remember you, put the name to the face. So I just send a selfie with them, like, it was nice meeting you, here's a photo just for reference.
That's a great idea.
And then they remember you.
Of doing this, because multiple times we've run into each other and we've had a selfie that you post later, and I'm also just so glad that you took that so that we can like remember the fun things we've done together.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be like crazy photo shoot or anything, but it's just kind of like in a moment of time, because I know like I'm a person that's very into the moment. So I usually ask for that towards the end, or if I know that the conversation, you know, you realize that there's so many people waiting in line for them, I don't want to be a time hog either. So I'm like, I know you have a lot of other people who want to talk to you, so I'll let you get to them, but can we take a quick selfie before, you know, or just like something that's meaningful to them too. So obviously, be an active listener, see like what's comfortable for them, because there's also people who don't like do social media but still would appreciate the photo. So maybe instead of DMing it to you, you're getting their email address.
Right.
So just because they're not on social media doesn't mean that they wouldn't want to remember. So email for me is huge. Instagram though, for those who I feel like are social, tagging them or just, you know, creating a separate document of their handles, because I have to screenshot sometimes, because if you're adding and finding people like, oh shoot, if they don't add me back, I'm like, what is their handle again?
Totally.
So I screenshot it, like I write it in my notepad on my phone. And then when I'm tagging them, I mean, who doesn't like feeling like, oh, I made an impact where I'm on their feet now.
Right, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
And you make that first genuine impression and they'll remember that.
That selfie is a great idea. I was at a situation over the weekend where somebody's like, can we take a picture together? And I was so thrown off, like, oh my gosh, this person likes me up, that they like enjoyed my company. Yeah. And I'm like, haven't forgotten it. And now I have their information. Yeah. And like, it was just them being super kind.
Yeah.
And also it's a great way to be like, okay, this is that person. This is that person. But I love what you said about, to be interesting, you have to be interested. And that can go for hosting a show and having guests, or just networking and meeting people, because usually people love talking about themselves. And if you're slightly an introvert or you're kind of shy, you don't love going to social events, but you know it will be beneficial to even make organic and genuine relationships, ask them about themselves. And I guarantee you there will be something interesting about them, and you just ask more about that thing and then ask more about that thing.
Yeah. I mean, just today on my way, I was like, I'm from OC and I just moved to the OC. So it was about a good hour. So I was like, I'm going to be on the Cinematography for Actors podcast. Let me have a listen. So I was like on the recent episode and at the very end, I noticed y'all like listed some 4 quick interesting facts. And like, I had never met Bree before. So I was like, oh, I heard that you love talking about UFOs and aliens.
And immediately I lit up, and now I'm like, yes, let's talk about it. Let's talk about my favorite.
Cancel the podcast.
Yeah.
But I think, again, you know, if you're going to be on the show, I, as a host, do heavy amounts of research anyways, but I think it's a good thing to have when you're at conventions where you're meeting your favorite folks. Like, people, like you said, you're not gonna not flatter somebody by knowing facts like, oh, you listen to the podcast or you actually watch my videos, because a lot of people be like, oh, like that was such a great, you know, whatever, X, Y, and Z. But the people who are like, I've been following you in a non-stalkerish way. I've been like watching your videos, and what you said about this is very specific. That means they've listened and they've watched, and that makes me more like, oh, that's really kind of you. So if you want to, even before when you're doing the networking, a lot of it is in the research and the preparation. So that's my biggest thing too, that I do for every one of my interviewees and my guests. I do a deep dive into what they've talked about before, so I don't repeat it as much. And I also get fun facts about them that I can integrate into my interview. And then they just get taken aback while I'm like, you know, stating all these interesting things that they're like, how do you know so much about, like, you've done your research? And it bodes well for the interviewee, the interviewer, to feel like they're getting their flowers on that.
Yeah. You are also a director.
Yes.
Now, this is something we've not talked about yet. A lot of people out there that we find that come into the CFA community are talking about how interested they are in different things in this industry, but how hard it can be to balance it all. And I think it's also a struggle, like here at CFA, like we have so many interests as a collective. And I think figuring out, you know, like actors, DP, also co-founders, like how do you approach the balance of, okay, this is my like directing world, but also I want to create an entire show that I've been doing for a decade. But how do you balance it all out? How do you allocate the time, the space, and make sure that you're fulfilled?
Yeah, I feel like we have a lot of multi-hyphenates in this room, and you probably have a lot of multi-hyphenate listeners. And, just to give you a little background, I was born in San Francisco, raised in the Bay Area. I've been in the Bay Area like all my life until the last 10 years where I moved to LA, because in the Bay, I felt at the time as an associate producer on television shows, I felt like a big fish in a small pond. And I say that with the kindest, like non-ego. I wanted more. I needed the community. Really, there was no community of filmmakers like really in the Bay Area was I from at the time. I'm sure things have changed. So they're like, if you want to make a dent, if you need a, you gotta move to LA. And so when I did move to LA, I had been a part of all these networking groups before, and I found myself in a lot of the acting world. And I realized that when I was networking, I was meeting a lot of people that didn't care to like get to know me, because I think maybe in that moment I felt more like competition. Whereas like you're acting, I'm acting too, and because we're in the Asian American community, there's like only certain rules. But I will say on that, like it never really bothered me. I was like, yeah, there might be a few roles, but if you get that role, then congratulations to you. You are the one that was meant for that role, and by you taking that role and doing a great job, it opens opportunities and more doors for other people. So to those people who feel like they're competing with people, like that's a scarcity mindset. And I really have welcomed and received a lot more opportunities, because it's like changed that from scarcity to an abundance mindset.
Absolutely.
Like there's always going to be something for everyone. So in the process of that, I was like, I went to this one audition when I was doing acting. When I first moved, I was like, okay, there's no hosting rep. I'm like, the closest thing would be acting and like going to improv comedy classes. But I was like, oh gosh, I need to like, I don't want to be an actor, but it's at the same time, it was something that just was natural because I was in front of the camera. And then there was this one audition for a commercial role where I was in line, and the casting producer was like, okay, guys, study your lines. Women, you're just here to look pretty, so don't worry about it. And it kind of just irked me that I was like, is that all we are? And I'm sure like every production is different, but I realized at that time, especially with the scarcity of opportunities for Asian Americans at that time as well, like if I want to see the person that I want to see on screen representing me, not as a, stereotype or caricature of what Asian people are, I gotta be the writer. I have to be the director. I have to be the casting producer. I have to be the editor, because ultimately out of everything that I've learned, I will say editing has been one of the most important, because nobody else can tell your story if you know how to edit your own story. So
God, if you want to be a content creator, you need to know how to edit.
You need to edit.
If that's one thing I'm exhausted by 95% of my life with this business. I love this business, but it's editing. And it's so true. You have to love editing and love also telling the story that you're trying to tell and see it in different ways to get it to work for your audience as well.
Yeah. And so I'm showing with your audience too, cinematographer, actors, if you're an actor out there, beyond acting, learn how to edit. Like that was the biggest thing, because even when I was a student reporter at my alma mater, UC Davis, go Ags, whoop. If I didn't edit it, or if I didn't have an editor, then the story would never break.
Yeah.
And, when you're working in news, it's like, no one's telling you to do the story. It's all on you. It's like, I'm reporting on it, but now I need to connect with an editor. And then I don't know how long that's going to take. And I don't know if they're going to see it from my eyes. And it's such a involved process. And I realized really quickly that I had to learn how to edit.
Yeah.
Because then I can get the story out immediately in 2 hours versus 3 days or whatever, because everybody has student schedules and stuff. So editing has been the crucial thing that I always tell people, especially if you're acting. It's like, learn how to be as indispensable as possible. Like, okay, I might not do an acting thing right now, but I know how to edit it. And as a content creator, you have to do all the things. So it also saves you money too. But, but if you have the ability and the resources to, like, the moment you can hand it off to an editor and a writer and that person loves doing that, then great, do that. But in the beginning, when the finances or resources might be a little limited, like knowing how to edit is such a huge toolkit. So I was like acting, hosting, editing. And then I realized in that audition that I kind of wanted to go into directing and cinematography. So there was a hot minute where I was really into cinematography, meeting all these female DPs under the hashtag Female Filmmaker Friday.
Okay, great.
I remember meeting Kamisha Davis. Like, she was like one of the first people that I had met that was actually on social media posting about film. And I was like, wow, I need to connect.
Totally.
And then when I went to NAB show in 2018 to MC the post-production stage, I met so many more people, the Gals in Gear community, Amy DeLuise, and we just connected, and she connected me with more like women that was interested in gear and production, because at the time, I'm not going to lie, I felt like a lot of the women there who were in post didn't go because they didn't feel included, or it was like their scene, and the women who were there kind of like booth babes.
Yeah.
And, you know, just there to draw male buyers in to talk about their product.
Common.
Which is still common.
People are aware of it now.
It's
like
still
people
happening a little bit.
People who like, I mean, I think companies who have you know, women come in and work for the company are just like making sure that they are like working the booth, not just like standing there to draw people in now. So it's more like, I think it's great, but it's still a thing. Shows are really interesting because like a lot of people who are listening have not been yet to, we promote them to be like, you should learn and go.
Really need to go
but like a lot of what CFA does, in addition to promoting, like, go learn that stuff, go to NAB, go to Cinegear, go to Camera Image, go to Sundance, like go to workshops and things outside of like just festival environment, festival workshops, things like that. The whole idea of, just to touch on it, like the booth babe concept for those who haven't been to a show, is I think it used to be a thing where models, to demo kind of how lenses are looking or lighting is looking, they would put like, you know, women on bikes, or they would put like what they think a niche is for the buyers that exist. But now manufacturers are having to be more aware because they're seeing that buyers are everyone. And so there's not one type of model you can have in front of the camera. And so it's been nice to see recently that we've gone away from the idea of booth babe, and now kind of I mean, I know I do with my relationships, when I see that they're doing the booth babe thing, I'm like, are you guys doing booth babes? Like, it's like a call out, because it's like, it's wonderful to promote different models being in front of the camera, but we don't want it to be, we don't want to like fetishize the gear. And I think that's something that people are learning now and stepping away from, which is great. And so you're seeing less of the idea of what someone in heels would represent in the past, and more of like, if they're wearing heels, it's probably because like they have not done NAB and will change that for next year because they're tired of walking in those heels. But they're probably now more educated on that gear because vendors are knowing that they have to have a lot of great representation at their booth.
Oh, 100%.
You know?
Especially now with all your calls to like diversity, inclusion, DEI. It's like, it's the right thing, honestly. It's like, don't do it for diversity's sake, or, you know, but do it because it's right, and
it represents your audience.
I know a lot more women who are purchase buyers with like multi-million-dollar budgets. So if you're gonna offend them by thinking they don't know anything about gear, you just lost multi-million-dollar contract.
So it's fun to see that even the industry is shifting a little on like the show side. Not just like who's in front of this like camera, but it's just like who is educating each other on different things. And so it's nice to see that that's happening, even if it's a little slower, that it's happening and it exists. And so once again, I will tell people, go to NAB, go to these resources, and you can always get free codes and passes to this stuff so easily. And you'll be like Haley, where you'll end up being inspired by someone who then becomes a part of your life. Which is wonderful. Now, from the directing standpoint, you've had that realization when you were there for the audition. You are still DPing? Are you still interested in DPing?
I still am interested in DPing, but I just realized, you know, when you're saying like when you're sometimes it's like, okay, you do a lot, but you can do everything, but also you can't do everything. And that's something I've had to realize.
It's a hard realization.
It's a hard realization where it's like, gosh, I mean, they are two different fields. Like, it really is one's behind the camera and one's in front of the camera. And in my transition of building a tech channel, I was asked to do a lot of on-camera stuff talking about behind-the-camera stuff. So I was still on camera and I was still utilizing both sides of me. So when I had to think about putting a media kit together, or my rate kit, I was including things like, okay, this is how much it would be to work with me starting if you wanted me to come on as a brand director. But this is how much it would be if you wanted me to just solely host a conference or something like that. So I have different rates, but I realized that a lot of people were inquiring more about my hosting services, and then while I'm there, like I can film my own stuff. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop in a way that I feel like I've been doing is high quality content. I understand enough about the lighting and the audio levels to produce like a high quality video product for the companies that I work with. But in starting the Nicki Sun Show, I realized, yes, I know how to do all these things, but in order for me to go further, I'm going to have to hone in on something that I really, really want. And what I can do every day without having to think about it or, lens and all that stuff. I give so much respect to everybody in their respective fields, but it's hosting, it's interviewing. It's like I can talk, I can research. It's the energy that the guests and I have that is unique. And so I was like, yeah, I can still set up the shot, but I'm going to hire people or bring on people that they're DPs, they're, known for that. And it would actually be amazing because when the episode comes out, it's not just me promoting it. It's like everybody who's involved promoting it too, because you feel such a sense of teamwork and a collective. So I've learned that it's nice to know about how much certain things cost, like what are the differences in lens and gear, just so you as a person who's maybe producing the show won't get swindled too, because sometimes they're like, oh, you don't know, we talk about women going into the car sales lot, like we might get hit with the 18.9 APR and like men will get like 2.97, so it really is such a interesting thing to just know. So I always feel like it is so powerful to know like what the going rates are, what day rates are, just working with each other, from actors to cinematographers to director, editor, like what it takes to make the production run smoothly. So I've learned from editing, from directing, from cinematography, like, okay, if you're going to need time to set up, you can't just tell somebody it's from 1 to 1:30. I'm like, I need at least half an hour to set up and strike so we're all calm and we're not stressing, and then I haven't over budgeted my time with the generosity of my guests. So it's all these things. At what time are you shooting? Okay, this is natural lighting, but maybe I need to bring a lantern for aperture to fill the light if it gets a little darker to have consistent lighting. So that's as involved as I get now with the whole DP and director. Like I'll get on calls with studios because my camera crew will not be on all the calls, but I have to know how to make those executive decisions. Like, let's get on FaceTime. Like, this is where I envision it, because, since being the OC, like, a lot of these locations are an hour and a half away. I don't have the ability to go there and scout. So I'm like, can you put your camera right there? And then while they do that, I screenshot it and then I mock it up with my director's chairs and everything, like my boom mics, and send it to my crew. Like, this is what I'm thinking. Yeah. And then, I'm like, I think we'll need like a studio light or a key light here, and we should shoot out that way. And then we amongst us say, okay, I have this, I have that, I'll bring this, and then you guys will set that up while I'm setting this up. And it makes it so much easier to understand the lingo and the language. And then be for real, like if you don't know, like ask, like your colleagues are more than happy to like share with you, like, oh, this is why we shoot in this FPS or that FPS and all this language just becomes a part of your vernacular. Right. But yeah, if I was just doing one thing, I feel like I don't know how I would do the show, because it's already hard being independent as it is to like think about all the things. But if you do know a little about all the things, you're able to really see what you really need in terms of resources, and then you can really spend the money where it's going to actually benefit, versus like I just gave money away to have like an extra light or something. Like you had a light, like if you know what you're asking for, chances are the people you're working with have a plug or they're willing to bring theirs on too. So I think just knowing what you want, it's easier to communicate. But
we've talked a little bit about imposter syndrome at the beginning. Outside of that, what are some tips around, or just like how do you get people comfortable marketing themselves, whether it be as a creator or as a founder of a business or as a DP, director, producer? What are the tools that you would say are the best part about marketing yourself, not just others, but maybe vendors, to get sponsorship or to work closer with people, things like that?
It could be a lot of things, right? So this is just from my humble opinion.
Yes.
I know when I'm talking to a lot of cinematographers, they dislike the idea of putting any stills or like content on their Instagram because like that's not how it was meant. It doesn't portray it in all its glory. I'm like, yes, I get that. But also because there's a lot more people now being told to scour, social media in that way, you got to put yourself in the ring. Maybe it's not like your entire film, but maybe a still or a screenshot. I feel like that is very important. I've actually received 2 really big projects due to social media because I was like, there's no other way how you could have found me. So, and it was for 2 different parts of my life, which is why I don't know how to separate it. So one, Samsung found me and I was able to direct my first short film using their phone during the panorama. I call it the panorama because it makes it less tense. So during the panorama, I was reached out to, I guess their agency that Samsung works with found me through social media. They selected 4 filmmakers to give them a budget and also create a 3-minute short film using their phone. And they would do this virtual film festival, give you an article written up in Pop Sugar or Dodo Bird or Thrillist. And so I was with Pop Sugar, and my theme happened to be love in the time of COVID. And I just happened to find, I put out a word on social media as a filmmaker, and I was like, hey, I am looking for a couple with an incredible story to tell during COVID. And it just turned out that one of my friends that I just met, she met the guy and got engaged during the time of COVID. I'm like, thank God, because I don't want to be in charge of if you're just dating and it doesn't go through and then this video reminds you, so it's like, that's a little bit more solid. So like, let's do that, So that was one that was on social media. And then the other one was my hosting gig with Disney. To host the official world premiere of Turning Red. And those 2, I believe, they found me through social media.
Great.
So I would say, like, yes, it's a love-hate relationship. I feel like a lot of times actors who have gone through the training, are feeling that some roles are being replaced by these influencers that have multi-million following. But I'm like, at the end of the day, like, that movie is going to be what it is because of their casting choices. So let them be that. Like, if you're really serious about your craft too, like, invest in the time. So if these influencers are also investing the time and their craft to dedicate to acting too, then like, by all means, there's no way that is going to prevent certain people from we have so many resources now. I feel like social media, even your smartphones, has leveled the playing field for filmmakers, for actors, for hosts to just get themselves out there.
The entry level, it's great.
So, I mean, yes, it's a hit or miss because sometimes people just picking up a camera now calls themselves a director, and what have you directed, But there's also, like, people will see through that. I feel like our generation, the audience is so smart. It's like, there's certain things that you can't, even like booth babes, like, we're smart now. So it's like, like, we can make our own decisions about content. So I would say, like, get it. Like, if you are going to put yourself out there, you got it in some way. Maybe it was through social media. Maybe it was through a friend of a friend or, like an application process. But do everything you can to get your work out there. And what helps me from that imposter syndrome is, like, what does the world gain if I don't put things out there, So it's like you're doing something that you're very passionate about. It's for hopefully the greater good or the impact for other people to see themselves represented. At least that's what I feel from my show. And as an interviewer, it's always been about the other person. So I actually, because I'm promoting another person, it's kind of like easier for me on the psyche because I feel like I'm not promoting myself. I'm promoting like the person.
Yeah.
But in that, I'm also essentially promoting the show. So
what's
that's
it
like one way
to be interviewed by us then?
It's a tables are turned.
Yeah.
You're doing a really great job of putting me in the hot seat.
I know
But
it is
the
getting
AC's
hot
not
in
in
here.
here. But
It is getting hot in here. Yeah.
But we do it for the audio.
Yeah.
True.
We do it for the audio. It's
And
so
I think
true.
we look pretty good still.
Yeah. Humidity what?
We look dewy. It's nice. For the Nicki Sun Show, what are you hoping for audience that don't currently involve themselves in everything you've been doing but are going to start to on October 4th? What are the biggest takeaways you want the Nicki Sun Show to have? What is the main mission around it?
I think my biggest thing, and I've been preaching ever since I've taught at NAB show, anytime I have the opportunity to get on a mic in front of young people particularly, is authenticity. I feel, and this is why social media is such a double-edged sword, is comparison is the greatest thief of joy.
Absolutely.
And you feel like you have to do all these things because they're getting 1 million followers and oh my gosh, they just started yesterday and what about me? And if you think like that, it's just gonna steal all your freaking joy.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I really hope my show will do is by me focusing on people who are also emerging in addition to established, is to really have those one-on-one conversations again and then talk about their journey of how they got there and really be as transparent as possible. Pay transparency, process transparency, because the people listening could be inspired by, wow, that person hit 16 million in one day, but what did they do? So it's more focused on how did you do it, and guiding our audience into something that they can share and provide value and education. So beyond entertainment, I say the 3 pillars is you're creating content that is either educational, inspirational, or entertaining. And if you can do something that's all 3, great. If your content is not focusing on any of those 3, then you might want to reconsider what kind of content you're doing. So that also helps in a way with the imposter syndrome, because you don't have to think about, who am I to do this? I'm well, I firmly believe in the content I'm putting out. I'm bringing back one-on-one, face-to-face conversations in places that are meaningful to my guests. So even the locations are intentional for me. We don't go to a specific studio. I love to have that, but it's also take the viewers and me to the spot where you actually create.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of the MTV Cribs, but, with my friends in my director's chairs where anything can be a location, anything can be a source of inspiration. So, and just seeing how from very humble to very lavish, you can see how people really go through their processes. So I just want to bring transparency to some of the top creators in the world, and that's what I focus on too, is a very diverse range of creators.
Beautiful.
So it's not just one type of person that I'm interviewing. And so I hope that when I finally launch it, because I've already banked 6 interviews.
Great.
And so I'm trying to be better about the consistency, and I realized I had to give myself a 2-month leeway to schedule interviews, production, because I'm editing everything myself, and I'm just learning DaVinci Resolve.
We love Resolve. So streamlined.
We love Resolve. I wish I switched sooner, and it's free.
Yes.
So, just to my point about learning how to edit, there's no excuse not to learn it now, because there's so many free resources.
Yep.
There's so many amazing YouTube tutorials. Even on their website, they have an 1.5-hour tutorials. Yeah, you might have to listen and sit through all that, but it really is just the kind of content that I love to consume because it's teaching. And so in a way, that's kind of the interviews that I hope to bring, is you see your content creators every day, but what's their story and how they got there? I'm sure it wasn't just a linear line. All our journeys are squiggles or a backwards or a timeline on when you're editing. There's a jump cut and then you delete things and then you bring it back full circle. Our lives are very much like our editing timeline, or very much like a non-linear journey. So I just hope that through my show, I hope, if anything, ultimately that inspires other people to realize that their voices are just as important. And if you don't see it, or even if you do see it, the world is not oversaturated, because you are you. You have your own unique style. You have your own unique sense of you. That's incredible to know that there's no one else on the earth exactly like you. Mm-hmm. So if you're feeling like, oh, there's so many interviewers, there's so many podcasters out there, there's so many, like, so what? Like, you have your own unique POV, and there's going to be people that gravitate towards it. There might be people who don't. You might get 1 million followers, you might not, but I will say that you're just at least reaching out to that one viewer, that one listener, who might be the marketing partnership director of the biggest company, and then that's how it goes. So, I mean, people look at my channel, they're like, oh, she doesn't even have 1 million subscribers, not even 10,000, but I am full-time in this, and
that could happen overnight,
and
you
it
just
can
keep
happen.
doing what you do.
Yeah, and it's like a rabbit hole, right? Like, if somebody finds one of the interviews that you did really well with one person, they're gonna be like, oh my gosh, let me listen to all the other ones, and then that's how it happens. So I'm just, in the long run, focused on creating high-quality content that my guests could also be proud of, and that they could reference when other people ask them on shows, like, you know, when was this? Like, you know, I talked about it on the Nicki Sun Show, or I talked about it on Cinematography Actors. So listen to that episode if you want more details. And it constantly, like, resources and brings people. So I'm also in the space now where I try to drop as many people who have helped me, not name drop, but resources. People who have helped me, and I think that's the giver in me, where it's like, yeah, I didn't have resources like this, so how can I be a resource for others so they don't have to go through that, you know?
Yeah. Wow. We have to wrap things up, unfortunately.
Yeah, we do have to wrap things up, but I want to congratulate. We were talking before we started about stages and how you start in a stage where the people who are coming to do interviews with you, the people who are supporting you, are your friends who don't care if it's good or bad. They just are your ride or dies. Mm-hmm. And then there's another stage where people start to see that, oh, this is a thing. You start getting some gear donated, things like that. And I wanted to congratulate you because you're on a new stage now. And you told us that you have sponsorship, which is exciting because you are full-time in this. And a lot of this has been work you've been doing from the heart, and work you've just kind of been like, you're not represented, which I know because you told me. So you've done all of this just bootstrapped. And so it's really exciting, and congratulations.
Congrats, Nicki Sun.
Beautiful job.
I wish we had our, like, little board where I'll have to add it in post. My little applause button. Yeah. Exactly. I'm going to add it in. It's going to be really ridiculous. Nicki, thank you so much for joining us. We can't wait to watch the first of many. Is it going to be weekly, bi-weekly, monthly?
I'm hoping weekly.
Okay, great.
I'm like, not sure if I can do like maybe bi-weekly now. I'm like, I know I'm 6 out, but I'm hoping as I edit, it's like, it gives me a runway at least. So
great.
I'm hoping it'll be weekly, but we'll see. You know, I don't know how y'all structure your podcast, like season 1, season 2, and is it like 30 per season? I think I'm just gonna keep going until
that's, I think, where we're at as well.
Yeah,
until we figure out we need a vacation. And then we're breaking seasons. But October 4th, first episode comes out. Can you tell our audience where to find you?
It's gonna be really on YouTube. So I've learned to consolidate all parts of my life. So it's gonna be back on my OG, the channel that started it all, youtube.com/Nicki Sun, NICKISUN.
All right. Find the Nicki Sun Show October 4th, guys. Thank you so much for joining us, Nicki.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure speaking with you all.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you soon, guys.
Bye.